My name's Sasha. This is the January lecture series from ATAR Notes, and this is the Bio 3 and 4 lecture, and it's the first bio lecture of 2024, so get keen, super exciting. I hope you guys have had a really good holiday, had a nice break, actually relaxed because it's time to get back into it. And hope you guys are looking forward to year 12. It is really fun, even with all the work. Like, I had a great end of high school, so I'm sure you guys are going to enjoy it. With that being said, these lectures are really good for holiday revision and also getting a head start, which I feel like in bio, of all the subjects you really do need. Like, I would procrastinate studying methods by doing my bio, and I was so on top of it, I knew everything, and I was still cramming right before that final exam. So resources like this, going to lectures, like ATAR Notes lectures, going through notes, looking through PowerPoints, like, it is the more resources you can have to help you understand the concepts and content. Oh my god, I'm struggling today, sorry guys. Concepts and content is going to just be so helpful and make your life easier right at the end. So I think a little bit of don't think in hindsight, be proactive now, it'll be really helpful later on. So I also just want to mention, in case you were weirded out if the lights change, because I'm kind of filming this a little bit later in the day than I had originally planned anyway. Sorry, that's really not relevant to this lecture. Moving on. So the lecture is pre-recorded, but cool news, you guys can still stream it and watch it live and ask questions during live. I know you guys are all really worried about that, but don't worry, you can ask as many questions as you want if you're not understanding something, and those questions will be answered and responded to at the same time during the lecture time. So don't worry about watching a recording and not being able to ask questions. There's a live chat, people will be answering them. Also, bit of housekeeping before we move on to content today. After this lecture is done streaming, the recording will be made available to you, and so you can also download the slides, I think, and the recording off of the platform that you were watching this on. So pretty cool. You can save them and come back to them when you are revising the content, making sure you're all on top of it. So a little quick thing about ATAR Notes, if you are wondering, it's a company created by previous graduates for future graduates. So all of the tutors, all of the people giving lectures, everyone working behind the scenes, we were all previous QCE grads and high school graduates, and we're all super dedicated to creating resources and streaming classes like this that we really hope help you guys and are useful. Because we just want to be able to give you guys the best chance at success that you possibly have. So this is in line with ATAR Notes' mission to help students as much as possible, and that's what our lectures are aiming to do. So hopefully all of you are doing bio and you haven't accidentally signed up for the wrong lecture. If you have, maybe stay around, you might learn some fun stuff. But if you are also doing other subjects, I know some of the main ones available are chem, physics, specialist methods. If you're doing any of those subjects, there's definitely lectures on them. I think there's one for psych as well, which you should go check out, and English, there's a bunch, and they are really, really helpful. They give you a good understanding, good groundwork to start the year off right, so go check them out. I'm pretty sure most of them are after this one as well, so you should be able to make them. But everyone's worked really hard, so you should go support everyone else if you're going to watch my lecture. But with that being said, if this is your first interaction with ATAR Notes and you don't know that we don't just tutor biology, we tutor all the subjects for QCE. We also have a bunch of other things we offer, so the study notes, which is super helpful and definitely informed some of my study notes when I was revising. lectures. You can learn from the best. Sorry, that was really bad. Sorry, sometimes I think I'm too funny. Anyway, moving on. This is so bad. Sorry. Moving on. Discussions, there's online Q&As. You can also engage in online revision with like the videos. We have a newsletter as well, so they send it out to you quite regularly and like update you with information and things to do. There's the ATAR calculator as well if you are ever, having a bit of a rough exam day, you can see if you're still on track or, yeah, look, use the ATAR calculator sparingly. It's not about the number, it's about, putting effort in. But also it's actually really fun to like see if you're on track and compare. Anyway, sorry, getting a little distracted. There's also a lot of articles on study, like strategy and tips, and then you can also check out our website because there is just so much stuff. I know there's flashcards on the website as well. Past papers, which like we used in grade 11 and like for mock exams as well, so definitely check it out. Super helpful, super informative, and it's definitely going to be super useful in the coming year as you're getting towards the end of it. So yeah, go to atarnotes.com/register, I think. And then if you're looking for even more support, we have you covered with ATAR Notes Plus, which I think is actually where the flashcards are. I'm so sorry to get your hopes up, but there's a really, really good biology guide on the other ATAR Notes website, so and there's like a Q&A forum I think there as well, and then there's like an AI answer bot, a bunch of questions, and then like the text descriptions are super useful as well. They're like cliff notes but even better, so definitely check it out. Super useful. Let's begin with the lecture. So this is what I said. It's presented by me, Sasha, Biology 3 and 4. So a little bit about me. I'm a Leo. I also graduated in 2022, so last year, from Stuart Home. I received a 95 overall for biology, so that was at the end of externals. I studied ancient, bio, literature, methods, study religion, and psych. So if you have any questions about those or you're doing them, and we've done all of the other content we're supposed to be doing and I've answered everyone else's questions, I may be able to answer some other questions about that. And if you want, I am now a second year law and science student. I'm going into my second year at the University of New South Wales. So yeah, I live in New South Wales. Like recently, the move was last year. And it's been majority of the year, but I go to college there. I live on campus. It's very fun. But yeah, if there is time, I guess like with questions or in the live chat, and you have some questions about like QTAC applications, uni life, moving away from home, like at 18 to study in a state, or even just like doing law and science, definitely feel free to ask. Yeah, I can definitely talk about it, give you some help, give you some advice. But yeah, don't get super bogged down in, I guess, everything right now though. Like it's all gonna work out at the end of the year. Right now, we just need to understand we just need to understand biodiversity. Sorry, I'm also doing bio 1 and 2 and that's cells, but no, biodiversity today. So what you guys have covered, this is the nitty gritty. What you've covered. So at this point in the year, I'm assuming you guys have covered or really close to covering topic 1 of unit 3. And then obviously, having passed all of units 1 and 2, which is where you would have covered, so topic 1 of unit 3, sorry, I've written this kind of confusingly. Topic 1 of Unit 3 is where you would have covered biodiversity on both the species and organism scale. As you move on to topic 2, we're going to look less at the individual impact on the organism and the organism's individual impact on its surrounding environment, and we are going to try and understand the interspecies and intraspecies interactions that create a functioning ecosystem and lead to continued biodiversity. So there are 3 subtopics in topic 2. I'm pretty sure it's functioning ecosystems, changing ecology, changing ecosystems, and then population ecology. Today we're mainly going to be focusing on functioning ecosystems because it's pretty dense. There's a lot to cover in it, and having a really solid understanding of that is going to help you to understand the next 2 subtopics because they are super dependent on this first topic of functioning ecosystems, and also understanding that is going to help you later on in Unit 4 because they are actually quite related, and getting that above 20 mark, not above 20, the above 18 mark, when you're above 15 mark it's out of 20, sorry, I'm a little bit tired, but there's no excuse to not know. It's out of 20. So for the 2 assessment pieces, the written assessment, out of 20, for getting that 15 above, it's a lot of connecting the learning that you have at this time. So super important to just have a really good fundamental basis of this. This is going to definitely be assessed in IA1 and IA2, and also in the external assessment, which I've got some questions at the end to kind of show you how you can use studying the content as use questions as a way of studying the content to really help that understanding, so when you are in the exam you don't necessarily just have to rely off a memory, because I know for me, I'm not great at the whole memorization thing in exams. I need to have so many clues and things to think about and really, I guess just have the whole picture to be able to do the exam, because I will forget and then get myself freaked out. So this is a way that I found was really useful to help understand the content as well, because it's done in the subject matter. So something your teachers have probably talked to you about that I'm going to go on just really, really quickly because I want to get started on the content, but I think this is super important to discuss, is cognitive verbs. When you're learning the content, just stick to whatever the cognitive verb is and don't go above and beyond. If it's describe, if it's compare, you need to know the similarities, the differences, and the significance of one of those. And then if it's evaluate, you only need to know the similarities or the differences, and then the significance of the similarities or the differences. So it's understanding that, understanding how far you need to go on each point, and just being, because QCEE, the way they mark and the way their marking guides are set up is very specific. So just learning it the exact way they want you to is going to save you so much heartache later on down the line. So that's probably the most important thing to remember. But this is going to give you a good understanding of topic 1 content for IA1, IA2, and then definitely for IA3, have a think about what you've learnt in this topic and in topic 1 of Unit 3, and how that's going to influence Unit 4. Don't necessarily use exactly what you've learnt, just the understanding, the knowledge you've gained. Okay, so what we're covering today, topic 2 of Unit 3. Oh, I got it right. That's so cute. Sorry. Oh my god. So it consists of 3 subtopics: functioning ecosystems, population ecology, and changing ecosystems. We're going to focus on functioning ecosystems. And I've broken it down into like the following categories, which I think are the three main points they're trying to get you to understand in the content. So it's energy transfer and transformation, energy cycles, and ecosystem dynamics. Each subject matter point will first be taught, then followed by a relevant question to ensure the understanding of the content. But I did actually change the layout, so the questions are going to be at the end because, yeah, I just think it makes more sense to do it that way and to see the understanding. Like, it just helps. Like, just trust me on this one, guys. So this is the syllabus. I would say, like, I am going to refer to it quite a bit. So if you have a copy of the syllabus, now would be the perfect time to get it up. If you don't fret. But definitely super useful thing to have printed out and to just be constantly referring to. Know it inside and out as well, because you can kind of predict the questions for the external exam based on what the subject matter points are from the syllabus. So the other key point to note, let me get my laser pointer. Ooh, it does work. Oh, that's so exciting. Okay. So the other key point to note from the syllabus is about cognitive verbs. I was going on it. You're going to hear it ad nauseum from all of your teachers constantly throughout this year. You're going to write up flashcards and you're going to do them and be so over learning the definition for analyze. But it is truly so important, and I definitely wouldn't have gotten the marks I got without looking at the cognitive verbs. And it also saves you time, because you don't want to be spending the amount of, time and effort on a subject matter point that has recognition as its main cognitive verb compared to describe. So it does also help you to balance your time, which is very important, because unfortunately, I ran out of time. In grade 12, I did not have as much time as I thought I was going to. But let me point. Well, this is fun. Okay, so the way to attack the subject matter and your understanding subsequently is to look at what the cognitive verb is and then see what category it falls under. So there's 3 categories of cognitive verbs. Google cognitive verb glossary sheet, QCEE, and then also categories of cognitive verb, QCEE. It's going to show you how they're all broken down and how they're assessing you, and the similar kinds of words that they're assessing you. So there's different learning objectives, and that's how they're assessing you. But having an understanding of that means you can kind of just predict questions, which is, it's very exciting, very fun. So for analyze, that is in your apply data. I think it's in your ability to apply, but there's infer. It's infer. Oh, guys, it's been a long year. Let me just confirm that I'm right about this, because I don't think I put it in the slide. But I'm pretty sure it is infer. And then what? Analyze. Here we go. So there's retrieval, comprehension, analysis, and then knowledge utilization. So analyze is obviously in analysis, but then where is it? Is that? No. But sequence is in knowledge utilization. So that's having knowledge and then being able to use that knowledge. So it's important. It helps you to kind of understand where they're coming from and how they want you to learn the content, which is going to help you to understand it. So let's move on from this. Let me turn off my laser pointer. Okay, so content, which I'm sure you're all super keen for. we're going to begin with energy transfer. So this little bit of lesson is going to relate to the subject matter point, sequence and explain the transfer and transformation of solar energy into biomass as it flows through biotic components of an ecosystem, including converting light to chemical energy and producing biomass and interacting with components of the carbon cycle. So basically, the syllabus wants you to be able to sequence and explain the transfer of solar energy in 3 formats: food chains, food webs, and pyramids. So pyramids are going to include pyramids of energy, pyramids of biomass, and pyramids of numbers. Yes. And they're going to want you to be able to look at one of those diagrams and explain how energy transfers and transforms. So yeah, it's specifically asking you to understand how energy is transferred to convert light to chemical energy. So that's phototrophs and chemotrophs, and how biomass is produced and transferred between different organisms, which is autotrophs to heterotrophs, and how that transfer of energy interacts with the carbon cycle, which is something you do a little bit later on when we cover energy cycles, which we're doing today. So get super keen for the carbon cycle, guys. But yeah, that's also something that you need to kind of be on the lookout while you're doing, while you're studying or revising or learning content, is where is something in the syllabus going to push you to be able to apply those skills to another point in the syllabus. A lot of them are connected, and especially in your external exam, which I know you don't necessarily want to think about right now, even off with your data test and your student experiment, but it is actually really important to be able to think about the external exam. You are learning to sit that exam. It's 50% of your mark, so it is really important while you're studying science and math to be thinking about that as the end goal, as much as you don't want to, because you can't rely as much on your internal assessment, unfortunately. So that's my best piece of advice. But yeah, so the key point to note when you're studying the syllabus point is that they want you to be able to explain how energy, and specifically solar energy, so they want you to acknowledge that the single source of energy, the ultimate source of energy, is solar energy or sunlight. And then they want you to be able to see that energy can be transferred and transformed into biomass. And then after that, they want you to sequence how it will flow through an ecosystem. So they want you to understand what the properties of energy are and how that works and how it interrelates, and then understand how that energy from the sun creates a cycle through an ecosystem. And then they want you to be able to draw it or create a diagram of it to, highlight those interactions. But yeah, the ultimate energy source we have is sunlight, and it's when it's photosynthesized, it's converted to chemical energy by photosynthesizing organisms. It isn't necessary to understand the process of photosynthesis in detail. If you go to the syllabus, there's 2 columns. There's the subject matter, and then there's additional notes on the side. In the additional notes on the side, it tells you explicitly what parts of photosynthesis you need to know, and pretty sure, don't quote me verbatim because I'm gonna paraphrase, but pretty sure it is that photosynthesis converts solar energy, the process of photosynthesis and the use of chloroplasts is what converts solar energy into chemical energy, and that chemical energy is used to create new biomass. So, and it because it's passed between organisms as food. So, either as the plant matter itself or as other organisms that have consumed the plant. So, that's what it's essentially getting you to highlight and understand in terms of photosynthesis and energy. But yeah, don't stress about remembering the whole process of photosynthesis. I definitely did struggle with it when I was going through grade 11 and was so relieved to see that in grade 12 it was not as important. So as long as you understand that and you know that it's photosynthesis that is responsible for solar energy being our ultimate source of energy, you're golden. The other thing they want you to note is that chemical energy is found as food, and it is what creates a flow of energy between different organisms, and that energy is going to flow upwards from primary producers to high-level consumers or higher order consumers. So that's going to be the way the energy is flowing as well. Energy is going to be lost between these different levels, but the way the energy is going to flow is from the lowest level, which is the primary producer, which is photosynthesizing plant matter, and then it's going to flow upwards and by what consumes each thing in the food chain or food web, which is how they come together in sequencing. So, well, the more you know. Okay, so these are, I guess, the labels, which I was discussing a little bit before. So, types of organisms, there are two overarching categories that we can classify organisms into when we're trying to understand their interaction with the environment. So, either they use sunlight to generate energy, or they use chemicals to generate energy. The one that you are probably going to become more familiar with is autotrophs and heterotrophs, which is whether or not they require the use of organic molecules from other organisms to create chemical energy. That is typically how we would refer to it in food webs and food chains, but it's important to know both, just as basic understanding. So yeah, these labels are also really vital to remember because they are going to form the basis of all the dynamics we are drawing in our ecosystems. And the easiest way to understand these labels is to know how they're derived, and then based on that, how they're going to interact with each other. So let's continue. This is a graph of the organism. Let me get my pointer out. Sorry, I'm really excited about this laser pointer. This is all organisms. We can then split it down to uses sunlight, does not use sunlight, phototrophs, chemotrophs. They use carbon dioxide, they use organic molecules, so then these are photoautotrophs, and these are photoheterotrophs, and then the same for chemotrophs. So this graph is how we divide them. And as you can see, phototrophs use sunlight and chemotrophs do not, which is the biggest distinction to make, and it's the easy one to be like, okay, this is the difference. It's whether or not they use sunlight. And if you think photosynthesis and then you think phototroph, you go, okay, so they're the ones that use sunlight to create their chemical energy, which would mean chemotrophs don't. And if you go chemotrophs, chemical energy, that's how you get that they don't use sunlight, which means they have to obtain their energy from another source because they require just the plain old chemical energy. So yeah, and then obviously it splits down again into carbon dioxide, and so like the use of carbon dioxide and then the use of organic molecules. Unfortunately, I don't have a really cute way of remembering which one is which. You do kind of just need to learn it. Unless you can think of one. So if anyone has a good idea or they've heard something or if I can think of one by the time you guys are watching this lecture, I will 100% put it in the live chat. But yeah, otherwise, let me know. I can't think of one, so I'm really sorry, guys. But let's continue. Let's look at what these mean and how we can understand them. So getting back to our subject matter point, we understand what these animals are in terms of exchanging energy. Now we need to think about how they're exchanging energy and why the energy is being transferred and transformed, why it's not just being used and gone, and why is that creating a flow? Why is it creating a cycle of energy? So I'm going to take you all back to I think grade 10, I think it was grade 10 physics or chemistry. So you can tell I didn't do either of them in high school, but the law of conservation of energy. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only be converted from one form of energy to another form of energy. So, when you are converting light energy to chemical energy, that chemical energy is going to end up being lost and then absorbed by the atmosphere and then becoming the solar energy again and creating a really cool cycle. So I'm going to go through this diagram in a sec. Don't think you've gotten out of this quite yet, but basically the way to summarize this, because it's a long summary, just gearing you up. So solar energy is transformed and transferred through biotic cycles to create new biomass because energy cannot be recycled. Because the energy can't be recycled, ecosystems require constant input of energy to create biomass, which is when the solar energy is transformed into biomass through the photosynthetic process. So that is the subject matter point that you're trying to target, which is conversion of light energy to chemical energy. So to target that, you need to understand that solar energy is transformed into biomass through the photosynthetic process. This resulting chemical energy from photosynthesis occurs in relation to the carbon cycle. So it's going to provide oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide, and will also occur in relation to the cellular respiration process. Oh my god, grade 11 biology. Oh, do you see the connect? I'm a little bit more excited than I should be. But that connection is where the cellular respiration is going to lead to the creation of new biomass, because that energy is going to be absorbed by the sun, and then the sun is going to be created, transformed into chemical energy through the photosynthetic process, which is then going to be transferred up through all of the organisms and then back to the sun. And isn't it so, it's so nice. Which is how the cycle of energy transfers and transforms, flowing through the biotic components of the ecosystem. So when they say biotic components as well, they don't necessarily want you to specifically say, oh, it's this and this. It's they want you to understand that it's going to flow through the photosynthetic process and then the carbon cycle, which are both biotic components of an ecosystem, which we will not get into the photosynthesis much, but we will get into the carbon dioxide, the carbon cycle later on, which is a very big biological component of an ecosystem. So just quickly, we're going to look at this diagram. So this is the light energy. Light energy is going into the primary producers. Notice the arrows are going upwards. That is the way the energy is flowing. So it's going to go up to the consumer that is above it. So, or the trophic level that is above it. So this is our first trophic level, trophic level 1, primary producers. This energy that's stored as biomass in the primary producers is going to go this is the biomass of the primary producers. it loses some of its energy, some of its biomass, some of the energy stored as biomass as heat during the cellular respiration process and through the carbon dioxide cycle. Oh my god, why do I keep saying carbon dioxide? It's the carbon cycle. I'm so sorry. I'm probably going to keep doing it. I really apologize. It's the carbon cycle. That's what I mean. So it's going to lose energy through heat loss, so like radiation, reflection, waste, cellular waste, and then that's going to be transferred through the carbon cycle, through decomposes, and then absorbed by the sun again. But all of the energy that has not been lost as heat energy is going to be consumed by the primary consumers, which is again going to lose energy to heat, cellular respiration, biological processes, waste, dead matter, etc., which is going to be absorbed by the decomposers and detritivores. And whatever energy they have left that is stored as biomass is going to go up to secondary consumers, and so on until you hit the final higher order consumer of that food chain or of that food web. This energy that is, eaten, not really eaten, but is given to like the decomposers, is then transformed and absorbed by the atmosphere, sun energy, and then you have the cycle. It's so nice. It really is. I wish everything was as nice as like the energy cycle. It's so good. Anyway, so autotroph, herbivore, and carnivore levels are called trophic levels. Now, this subject matter, new subject matter point, guys, very exciting. Our subject matter point is analyze and calculate energy transfer, so food chains, food webs, and pyramids, so pyramids of energy, biomass, numbers, and transformations within ecosystems, including loss of energy through radiation, reflection, and absorption, efficiencies of energy transfer from one trophic level to another, and biomass. So, autotrophs and then the herbivore and carnivore levels of consumer, they are the trophic levels. They're going to go from trophic level 1 to trophic level 2, and so on. So, there's two things we can talk about when we're talking about energy of trophic levels. Gross productivity potential and then net productivity potential. So gross productivity potential is the amount of energy obtained from the previous trophic level. So that's the total available amount of energy, which is kind of what I was trying to explain, where some energy is lost as heat, some is radiated, some is reflected, some is lost as cellular waste, cellular respiration, etc. The gross productivity for the trophic level, the gross productivity potential is how much of that energy is available to them. So not how much was below the was present in the trophic level below them. It's how much is available to them when they obtain that energy. Its net productivity potential, I meant to say as well, gross productivity potential is just for the first trophic level. So that is how much is available for the first trophic level. Net productivity potential is lower than gross productivity and is for every subsequent trophic level, and it is the amount of energy available for that next trophic level that doesn't include what energy has been lost through respiration, waste, etc., etc. I was just going through my notes to just check something, but yeah, so trophic level efficiency is the net productivity of the trophic level over the net productivity of the previous trophic level times by 100%. So that's how you're going to calculate the efficiency between trophic levels. How you're going to calculate the gross productivity potential or net productivity potential is through addition and subtraction, you're going to see you are normally given majority of the answers. Sometimes it's like algebra, you don't have one answer, but you can work it out by having a total number and then subtracting things, adding things, and flipping them around to get to the answer. But yeah, you're typically going to be given questions where you can work out through addition and subtraction how much available energy there is. And then when you're doing trophic level efficiency, they are going to give you, unless they want you to calculate it first, like they are going to give you the ability to access that net productivity of both trophic levels. They're not going to throw you into the deep end and be like, just guess and figure it out. Don't worry, they're not that mean. They're really not that mean. So biomass is the next calculation you need to be able to do, and that is dry mass over wet mass. It's super easy. You'll be so fine figuring out how much biomass there is. So that's figuring out how much available biomass there is as well. And then just to get a little bit into, I guess, energy transfer, efficiency, etc. Energy efficiency transfer is calculated by available energy of the trophic level. Blah, 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 what I've already said, sorry. But the loss is calculated through the energy of the second trophic level subtracted from the first trophic level. So you may also be asked to tell them how much energy has been lost or how inefficient the transfer of energy has been. Transfer of energy is always going to be inefficient, just baseline, because energy is always going to be lost from level to level. There is always a decrease in the available biomass between each trophic level, which means there is always a decrease in the available amount of energy. Which is why if you're doing an energy pyramid, it's always going to form an energy where producers at the bottom level have the most available energy and the higher order consumers have the least available energy, which is why they need to eat the most. So because this transfer of energy is always just going to be inefficient, you can use as a gauge, not as fact, not as gospel, but as a gauge that approximately the trophic level efficiency is going to be about 10% between each one. So meaning that the 10% of the net productivity of one level up ends up as the net productivity of the next level. So, fun little fact. Other thing to note is that decomposers are what break down the dead organisms. They undergo cellular respiration from this process, and then they release that heat and they get the energy from breaking down the dead organisms, which also is their own little cycle that we'll get into in the carbon cycle, but it is very important in transferring the energy back into solar energy, and so back into the atmosphere. Okay, let's continue. So this is the flow of energy, and we have a new subject matter point again. Construct and analyze simple energy flow diagrams illustrating the movement of energy through ecosystems, including the productivity, gross, and net of various trophic levels. So for this subject matter point, it is not key to have a detailed understanding of how photosynthesis works, again, but you need to comprehend the input and output of gross and net energy. So energy flows from the primary producer, which is going to be your autotroph, through to the herbivore, and then the carnivore. So this represents the flow of energy through ecosystems because animals are absorbing energy by consuming plants, so herbivores, or other animals, carnivores, and decomposing the plants and animal matter release energy that has been absorbed and is reabsorbed by the atmosphere. So that is essentially what you need to know in relation to energy flow. It's very dependent on the last 2 points. So if you understand the last 2 subject matter points, you will be so fine constructing and analysing the energy flow. The analysis component of this is going to definitely be math, and also like showing you understand how the different inefficiencies work, or how the organisms interact, because that is a big point of the content that we're looking at, is how do organisms interact? What are their interspecies and intraspecies interactions in an ecosystem, and how does that create a functioning ecosystem? How is that supporting biodiversity? So that's definitely what they're going to want you to do in an analysis point. Energy is also going to be, so they're also going to want you to show it as food chains, which is what this is, but also food webs, which I think is on the next slide. And then, be able to read how consumer interactions occur, and how sometimes in a food web, third order consumer can be a third order consumer in one food chain of the food web, but a second order consumer in another chain of that food web. And so understanding how those interactions work. However, these only provide qualitative information on the feeding relationships of organisms. And so they're really useful to understand how energy flows through an ecosystem, not necessarily as useful to understand or convey how energy is transferred throughout the ecosystem. So to understand that, a better method is through a pyramid of numbers, which is where the trophic levels are displayed as a series of steps with differing widths. Pyramid of biomass, total dry mass of all organisms in the trophic level at that time. But most importantly, and most usefully, and what you will see the most, a pyramid of energy, which is constructed using energy levels determined from the given area over a specified period of time for each trophic level. So, super fun, super exciting. This is the food web I was talking about. Basically, what you need to be able to do is illustrate that the feeding relationships within the community can be made up using a food web. I need the laser pointer for this. And show who eats who in the community, and how they're made up of multiple food chains. So these are the primary producers, phytoplankton, and then herbivorous zooplankton. These are our primary consumers. This is a carnivorous zooplankton, so it is eating this zooplankton, but its energy is flowing this way, which is the way the arrow points. So a little fun thing to remember, the direction of the arrow is the arrow points towards the predators and away from the prey, which highlights the flow of energy, obviously, as it flows from prey towards the predator. But you can also remember the arrow's direction by thinking that the arrow goes into the mouth of the predator. So if you're like me and you use the crocodile eats the larger thing to remember your less than greater than signs, same rule applies with this. It's kind of the opposite, but it's going into the mouth. The bigger one wants to be fed, and the arrow was pointing towards the bigger one. So little fun tip. Okay, and then these are our pyramid of numbers, and then our pyramid of biomass. So a pyramid of number, the interesting thing about it is it doesn't really look like a pyramid, because each level of the pyramid is proportional to the number of organisms there are. So this trophic level is based on how many trees there are, and in this ecosystem at this time, there are more aphids than there are trees. And due to the shape of the pyramid, you can see that there are more aphids present in this area of ecosystem at this time than there are trees. However, when you look at the pyramid of biomass, which is similar as each area, like the area of each level is proportional to each trophic level's biomass, but is generally in the shape of a pyramid because the available biomass typically increases through like up towards the higher order consumer in that kind of pyramid, and it's the same for a pyramid of energy. But the final pyramid, which I don't have a picture of because I went through the detailed pyramid of energy earlier on, the final pyramid is a pyramid of energy, and this is used to explore trophic level and energy flow within the ecosystem, and it's really good for understanding energy efficiency as well, which is what we've been trying to get to all along. So we will continue with this content. The last one before we move to energy cycles, super exciting, I know, is the loss of energy, which is just going to help you understand how energy flows through the ecosystem. Knowing where you lose energy will help you construct, sequence, create all of these diagrams. So 3 main ways we lose energy: radiation, which is the energy given off as heat by organisms, and then reflection, frequencies of the light that are reflected and contribute to the color of an organism. So that is when like light passes through a plant without being converted into chemical energy and is therefore reflected back into the atmosphere. And then absorption is where the frequencies of light taken up by the organism, which contributes to body temperature. And it is also how like light energy goes back into the atmosphere because it is absorbed. Oh my god, I thought I just stopped recording. No, okay, good. How the energy goes back into the atmosphere and how that energy is used again by the sun and transferred and transformed throughout the ecosystem. I feel like we've touched on it. It's just always a key point to, I guess, think of and understand is how is, each thing interacting, and how do we go through energy, and how can we understand each component of this energy cycle to understand how it flows, which is why our next topic is very important, because we are going to get into energy cycles. Woohoo! So our first subject matter point for this, and it is, I'm pretty sure our only subject matter point for this topic, is describe the transfer and transformation of matter as it cycles through ecosystems: water, carbon, and nitrogen. So we're going to begin with the water cycle, which is definitely the easiest and I think the one everyone is the most familiar with. So basically, let me get my pen out for this. This is our water cycle. Let's go through it. So it's going to rain. Here's the rain coming down and it lands on the mountains. And there's this thing called surface runoff. Surface runoff is where the rain collects and then flows down into valleys and different trains, and flows into either rivers or goes through to the ocean. It can also be absorbed as aquifers or like an infiltrate the percolation, so that's when it becomes an aquifer, it's groundwater. And a lot of the time it's because the water is below the surface level. So our surface runoff is before the water can get below that surface level, and it's normally when there's way too much water at the ground level, interestingly enough. some of this water is going to be evaporated, so that particularly on the ocean, the sun is going to evaporate the water, which is then condensed and precipitated. Some water is transpirated as well, so that's taken by plants but then transformed back into the atmosphere. So through the process of photosynthesis, it's released back into the atmosphere, collected through condensation, and then released as precipitation again. And then some is able to infiltrate soil and sent through groundwater to the ocean, and is then evaporated back into the atmosphere. The other thing that they haven't got on this diagram is glaciers or icebergs, which is where water is stored and collected, and then obviously when the ice caps melt, that is extra water that is not actively within the water cycle, which is then what becomes the issue because it's increased flooding. Whenever flooding happens as well, it's because there's too much groundwater and then it all builds up and there's too much water to be reabsorbed by the soil, and so it runs off and you get that really, really bad surface runoff, which is where you get flash flooding as well. So yeah, interesting. The water cycle, super fun, definitely the least complicated, pretty easy if you can just remember, like, the key part is evaporation and transpiration are together. That is condensed and then precipitated, which is contributes to surface runoff or is absorbed into groundwater. And then that groundwater, or through infiltration or percolation, is then sent out to oceans or rivers, which is then evaporated or absorbed by plants, and so on and so on. Hence the cyclical nature of this. Super exciting. Okay, let's move on to something a little bit more complex. Something a little bit more intense. Let me have a little sip of water first though, because I have been yapping a little bit. Sometimes I feel like I just sound like way older than I actually am. Like, I'm 19, I swear. I swear. Anyway, let's continue. The nitrogen cycle. Woohoo! So technically there's like 5 steps to the nitrogen cycle. There is a lot to cover though. It gets a bit complex, which is why I wanted to start off with something a little easier. Hence the water cycle. But let's begin with the nitrogen cycle. So let me get my trusty little oh goodness, laser pointer, having a mind blank. And let's begin. So I'm going to go through the steps first, and then we'll go through some of the more nitty-gritty information about the nitrogen cycle, nitrate fixing, etc., to truly understand this, because it is definitely one of the... Oops, sorry, I did not mean to do that. Oops, I spoiled it. Okay, we're doing the carbon cycle next, guys. But yeah, nitrogen cycle, it is just one of those things you kind of have to get in your head. It does flow a little bit, but it's also a little bit confusing. So let's begin. We start with step 1A, nitrogen fixation. So step 1 is nitrogen fixation. Step 1A involves lightning. Woo! I'm really getting just a little bit icked out by myself today. Sorry. I hope this is, like, helpful at least. Yeah. So nitrogen fixation. Lightning converts nitrogen gas in the air, so N2, to nitrates, NO3, by bonding it with oxygen and then dissolving in the rain. So lightning goes through, it absorbs, and now we have a nitrate. The other way we are able to have a nitrate is through nitrogen gas, N2, being converted to ammonia, NH3, or ammonium, NH4, by nitrogen fixing bacteria in the soil or root nodules of legumes or clover plants. So this is when we have nitrogen that's in the air, hence atmospheric, and this nitrogen is fixed by bacteria, so nitrogen fixing bacteria living in the roots of these nodules, which then creates the nitrates, or ammonification, which creates ammonium, and then the nitrifying bacteria creates the nitrite, which creates the nitrate. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves. So we have our nitrate, and we have our nitrogen fixing bacteria that has created our nitrate, or our lightning that has created our nitrate, which we'll start with the lightning, because I feel like the denitrifying bacteria makes, like, the nitrate through nitrogen fixing bacteria makes so much sense when she'd gone through the circle one time. So I got a little ahead of myself, but I couldn't help it. I like nitrogen fixing bacteria. Anyway, so we have our nitrates now, and we get to look at the process of assimilation, which is here. So this is when the plant absorbs the nitrate from the soil and uses this to build up proteins. The plant then may be eaten by a herbivorous animal, and that biomass from the animal is used to produce animal protein, or creates waste that contains nitrogen, which is used by decomposers, and we get our second steps, the decomposers being the aerobic and anaerobic bacteria and fungi. So then we get to our second step, which is ammonium, or nitrification. So the urea, an adjusted material, is broken down by decomposers, which results in the nitrogen being returned to the soil as ammonia or ammonium. So ammonia is NH3. Sorry, pardon me. And then ammonium is NH4. Ammonia, NH3, and ammonium, NH4, are converted to nitrites, which is NO2, and then nitrates, NO3, by nitrifying bacteria in the soil. Step 4 also gets into this, but it is a little sadder. So let's say the bunny did not excrete waste and instead passed away tragically. And we're having a bunny funeral. So the bunny is buried, and decomposers break down the body of the dead organism. So they break down the bunny's body, and that results in nitrogen being returned to the soil as ammonia, NH3. That's not NH3. Oops. Oh, I don't have that on this diagram. So it either goes to ammonia or ammonium, which is NH4. And the ammonia and ammonium are converted to nitrites, which is NO2, and then to nitrates, which is NO3, by nitrifying bacteria. Our last process. So do you see now how, like, the lightning, or nitrogen fixing bacteria, but like lightning kind of starts it, creates this nitrate, which is then absorbed by the plant through assimilation and then decomposed and through into ammonia, and then through ammonification becomes ammonium, and then through nitrification, which is nitrifying bacteria. This is the tricky bit, I think, with this cycle, is remembering not like what each step is necessarily, but what bacteria occurs at which step. So nitrifying bacteria, nitrification, which can converts the nitrite into the nitrate. So now we're back to where we started. We're at this nitrate. We know that atmospheric nitrogen can be used through the cycle to get to a nitrate, and we also know that lightning can get to that nitrate. So how does the nitrate become nitrogen? Well, this is through the process of denitrification. So in some conditions, denitrifying bacteria in the soil can break down the nitrates, NO3, by liberating oxygen and returning nitrogen into the air, N2, which is atmospheric nitrogen. Oh goodness, my laptop is going to die. I thought I plugged it in. I'm so sorry. This is not the greatest. I would pause the recording, but I am unfortunately unable to. So you guys are going to see me struggle to win against the battle of not your laptop dying on you all the time. Come on for the journey, guys. Honestly, sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm really not supposed to do this, but we're so close to understanding the nitrogen cycle. We can't stop now. We can't let adversity get us down. Okay, let's continue. Nitrogen cycle, denitrification. So, in some conditions, denitrifying bacteria in the soil breaks down nitrates. We were here. This is where we were. Nitrates by liberating. Is my laptop charging? This is the real question. USB charging. Oh my god. I swear it's always when you need your laptop to work. It doesn't. Yes, it's charging. It's charging, guys. This is so good. Okay, cool. So, let's get back to nitrification. The really, really fun stuff. So, denitrification. In some conditions, denitrifying bacteria in the soil will break down nitrates, NO3, by liberating oxygen and returning nitrogen into the air. But this usually occurs in waterlogged soil. It was found in 1999 also that nitrites, ammonia, and ammonium can be converted back into nitrogen by a newly discovered bacteria, which sorry, someone honked really loudly then. I'm definitely gonna butcher this. I did not take Latin in school, but Bricadia animoxidans, which is the animox reaction. Don't get bogged down in it. Don't worry. It's a little superfluous. It's an interesting fact to know. I think it's a little fun. It's pretty cool. There's this really specific bacteria that can just convert everything into atmospheric nitrogen, but don't stress. You're definitely not going to be tested on that. You just need to understand that in the stage of nitrate, with the use of denitrifying bacteria, nitrates can go through the process of denitrification and become atmospheric nitrogen again and start the cycle from that starting point all over again. I think the thing that can confuse people about this, and so I think it's the thing to not get bogged down when you're revising it, is that the cycle is not super cyclical. Like, it's cyclical, but also all of the processes can start, like, it doesn't have to start at the same spot. It's not like the life cycle of a chicken where of course it is a highly condensed. It's not like the energy cycle the flow of energy through an ecosystem that we were just looking at before, that's super nice and just goes in its nice little one cycle, and it just stays the same throughout it, and everything is the same, and it's very nice. Like, the nitrogen cycle is just, it's whatever it wants to be, which is great, but it makes it really confusing. The other part is a lot of the things sound quite similar when you're thinking about them, because it's like nitrogen fixing bacteria But then there's two types of nitrogen-fixing bacteria. There's nitrogen-fixing bacteria that lives in the legume root nodules, and then nitrogen-fixing bacteria that lives in the soil. There's the process of ammonification. There's the process of nitrification, but then also denitrification. And then nitrifying bacteria is for nitrification. Denitrifying bacteria is for denitrification. That one's pretty helpful. Nitrogen-fixing bacteria can be for ammonification, but also assimilation, which is what makes it tricky. So yeah, don't get super bogged down. Write out the steps. There's 5 basic steps. There's 5 basic states that nitrogen is in, or yeah, like 4. I guess it depends if you're looking at like the in depth at the process of ammonification. I think our year got tested on the carbon cycle. They'd normally pick one cycle, so if you're really lucky, you'll get the water cycle. But yeah, the nitrogen cycle, it is a little tricky. Just look at like this, like I think the way to really break it down is there's like 3 kinds of things to think about when you're putting the cycle together. So there is the stage that the nitrogen is being changed in. There is the bacteria that is facilitating this process of change. And then there is also what the nitrogen is called at each stage. And so I think when you start to just really group them across like that, so starting to go less from like, oh, this is stage 1 and this is what, like going like, okay, well, I know for nitrification that is nitrites, and I know that the process of nitrification occurs from nitrifying bacteria. It's like knowing that, and then like knowing that really well, and then piecing it into the cycle and understanding how each one flows from each of them, I think is the best way to tackle it. It's the way I tackled it. That may not work for you. You might just be really good at memorizing each step and just knowing exactly how the steps are supposed to be. But this is how I would probably look at it. So now we get to move on to the super fun carbon cycle. Woohoo! This is definitely my favorite to draw out of all of them. I don't really know why. I think I was just really proud of the drawing I did for it when I was like studying. Study tip that will definitely drive everyone around you insane. Get a whiteboard marker and you can write all your syllabus notes on your mirrors, and then whenever you go to bed and you like see a mirror, you know, in your room, you will have, like in your bathroom and you're getting ready for school, it's covered in writing, and you can just constantly read the syllabus and it rubs away like whiteboard, and it's also kind of fun. You get to pretend you're like a uni lecturer. That's what I did, and it did drive everyone of my friends and my parents insane, because you could no longer look at mirrors in my house without reading about the carbon cycle. But I was really proud of the carbon cycle, and I'm getting sidetracked by bragging, but that it was a really helpful study tip, so maybe it will resonate with someone. I hope it does. Otherwise, I've definitely found a study tip that is only helpful for those that need a little bit more help. So the carbon cycle. This relates to a couple of our earlier dot points, as I pointed out then, and I'm going to point out now. Super exciting. Love when the subject matter does that. I love when QCE like they think it through. It's nice. So it's a really important subject matter to understand. And here's how we're going to go about it. So first we have carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. This is our atmospheric carbon dioxide. We're going to start from there. This is, for me, the easiest way to go about the cycle of it. So we have our carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Through the process of photosynthesis, this is our first arrow, we have carbon that is captured by plants and animal in their tissue, hence carbon dating, guys. So that's so I thought it was cool at the time. So we call these producers. Do you see how it's relating? How it's building? Oh my god. So much fun. So we call these producers because they are responsible for producing the molecules for the rest of the food chain to function. We have a few different outputs from the plants for the carbon to flow somewhere else. So the most obvious one is consumption by animals. And we call these primary consumers if they eat the plants, secondary consumers if they eat the animals that eat the plants. And this extends further, but primary and secondary consumers are what we will focus on in this explanation. So these animals now possess carbon, which they will excrete or pass away. So they'll either excrete it through respiration and metabolism, but also as the death of the animals, leading to the decay, which both are going to lead to carbon returning into the atmosphere and water as carbon dioxide. This is because the carbon and plant in animal tissues is through either death or excretion is consumed by the decomposers and detritivores, respirated, and then released through respiration into the atmosphere. How fun is that? This is also respiration, which is where a carbon that is not absorbed into the plant and animal tissues is released through cellular respiration again. Now we're going to touch on one little thing, fossilization. So the carbon in the plants of animals and tissues is fossilized sometimes through pressure and years of geological changes, and we get things like coal, which we then mine, and through human involvement we release it back into the air. But the issue is we release too much of it, so it's another topic. Just know that coal can be released through human intervention. So the next option, if we're going from atmospheric carbon dioxide, is dissolving, which is where carbon dioxide is dissolved through water, and then through the process of photosynthesis in plankton or other sorts of like through photoplankton, is then consumed by animals and so on until it is consumed by a much larger fish, which can then also be fossilized and then will either create limestone or oil and gas, which we then drill for, and then through combustion, which is the same for coal, is released into the air as atmospheric carbon dioxide. How nice is that cycle? What a nice cycle. Definitely my favorite. Oh, it's such a nice cycle. It goes so well. It's an essential molecule for life, and it's shown up in every single organism. So yeah, it's really cool. And that's essentially all you need to know though about the carbon cycle. Next slide, we're on our final topic. How exciting! Ecosystem dynamics. So unfortunately, excitingly, we have a new subject matter point. Unfortunately, it was definitely my least favorite. It may be your favorite, but definitely not the most fun to learn about. Is define. Define for QCEE cognitive verb means you have to learn the written QCEE glossary definition of that term by heart. That's the only way you're going to get marks. If you understand it and you come up with something else that is not what QCEE has written down, you will not get the marks, and it sucks. And just because it's hard and exams can be hard and you can forget, but that it, like, realistically, you just have to memorize exactly what QCEE tells you that word means. So this one, we have, this is our subject matter point. Define ecological niche. Oh, let me turn my laser pointer off. I no longer need it right now. Define ecological niche in terms of habitat, feeding relationships, and interactions with other species. So the key way to attack this style of subject matter point, and the first way to attack it, is to memorize the QCEE definition of the term. So I have so graciously included the definition of ecological niche straight from QCEE's definition of it. So that definition is the role and space that an organism fills in an ecosystem, including all its interactions with the biotic and abiotic factors of its environment. So the way my science teacher told me to remember these kinds of glossary definitions is to pick key words for that definition. So, like, for ecological niche, the keywords, I do need my laser pointer. The keywords you do need for the definition: a role in space that an organism fills. So the role in space is the crucial bit. And then interactions with biotic and abiotic factors. So you need to understand that it's not just the role in space the organism fills, but it's also all of its interactions with biotic and abiotic factors of its environment. So yeah, that's the way. Like, it definitely helped me, because you would see the word and you go, okay, I know this is the big words they're looking for, and now I need to kind of fill in, like, the filler words. You can normally get away with that. But yeah, you can't, if you missed, like, all its interactions with biotic and abiotic factors, or if you said including all its interactions with other species or something, you probably wouldn't get the marks. So it does kind of suck, but you do sometimes just have to be realistic. And again, as I said, QCEE is very specific, and to save yourself heartache, to save yourself the trouble of, learning the wrong thing and then having to relearn it and putting in all this time, you have to learn it the exact way they want you to from the very get-go, and it is the easiest way to deal with it. But with that being said, our subject matter is not finished by just defining an ecological niche. We also need to understand it in terms of habitat, feeding relationships, and interactions with other species. So the two things we would look at is a fundamental niche and a realized niche. So fundamental niche is all the potential resources that a species can use in its environment. This requires the absence of competition. A realized niche is some habitats and resources are not available to an organism because competitors occupy them. This is what the species actually uses. So realized niches are narrower than fundamental niches because the species occupies a narrower range of habitats than it would in the absence of competition. So the realized niche can also be regarded as the competitive refuge. So we now need to understand how this relates to the competitive exclusion principle. So the principle is this. Two species, sorry, I really need a cough. The principle is this. Two species competing for the same limiting resources cannot coexist in the same place, meaning that for two species to occupy the same niche and compete for the same abiotic and biotic resources, one species will survive and continue to reproduce, and the other will not, i.e., it becomes outcompeted. So when one species has even the slightest advantage over another, the one with the advantage will dominate in the long term, no matter what. The only way a species is able to coexist in a stable environment is if they do so through niche differentiation. This is evident through accommodation tactics like resource partitioning or niche partitioning, which is where the niche is divided so all competing species use the environment differently in a way that helps them coexist and therefore survive. This can lead to the extinction of weaker competitors or to an evolutionary shift or behavioural change toward a different ecological niche. The only way a species are able to coexist in a stable environment is if they do so through the differentiation of the niche. I.e. they consume different foods or use different areas of the environment rather than they stop competing for the same resources. So let's look at some examples of resource partitioning. So you can see this is resource partitioning because of how all of the different animals are going after different sorts of food sources. So they've all occupied a different area within this same ecosystem or same ecological niche. Isn't it so fun when we use the word we're supposed to be studying? And so when they occupy their ecological niche, they all have a different area within that niche that they occupy to get their resource, which has then also which is helped by evolutionary adaptations to support this resource partitioning, which is really cool. The next example of niche differentiation is spatial niche partitioning, which I think is definitely my favorite. And it is evident through these birds. Look at them go. And they all they all sit in a different area of the tree. So they aren't competing to occupy the exact same environmental space because they've all occupied a slightly different space within the same tree, which is really cool. The other form of partitioning resources, which I couldn't find a really good diagram for, and I did look really hard, but I am not an artist, unfortunately. As much as I love to brag about my artistic abilities, they're not good. The other form of partitioning resources is temporal partitioning. So owls and hawks, who occupy the same ecological niche, will rely on similar resources, hunt at different times of the day. So owls are nocturnal and hawks are can't think of the word for non-nocturnal. That's not good. It's gonna come to me as soon as we start getting into the questions, and then I'll blurt it out then. So just so you know, it's coming at some point when my brain decides to cooperate. But the main point to know is that species have to occupy the environment differently when competing to coexist, and that is essentially what niche differentiation is, summed up nice and neatly. Now, this is the original experiment where you see a competitive exclusion principle amplified. So it consisted of two paramecium samples or cultures, and in the first part of the experiment they had separate cultures. So the paramecium aurelia and then the paramecium caudatum both existed in separate cultures and both had an abundance of resources. They existed in a fundamental niche. And then obviously because they were bacteria, they grow exponentially, but then they hit the peak of their environment within themselves due to how many available resources there were, overpopulation, etc. And so there was a plateau within their population growth, which you get into in population ecology. How fun is that? A little head start from the head start. What can I say? But so in the second part of this experiment, the Paramecium aurelia and then the Paramecium caudatum. Sorry, I know I butchered the Latin again, but it's okay. It's fine. That's what I tell myself. They were placed in a combined culture, and as you can see, the Paramecium aurelia had the slight advantage over the caudatum and outcompeted it for the resources, and the Paramecium caudatum became extinct. So they both thrived when they were in separate cultures, but when they were in the same culture, it was outcompeted. So that is essentially what the competitive exclusion principle is that one species will be excluded from survival. And so we are nearing our final content point of the lecture, which is define keystone species and understand the critical role they play in maintaining the structure of a community. So the same thing goes for this. When the cognitive verb says define, you have to memorize the QCEE's definition for keystone species, which is a plant or animal that plays a unique and crucial role in the way an ecosystem functions. When I was writing out my plan and notes for this and, organizing this PowerPoint, I still remembered this definition verbatim, which anyway, I was very impressed with. And the reason I remembered it is because of this one little sentence. Plays a unique and crucial role. So if you think about having an understanding of the syllabus and knowing where each subject matter point comes from does really help you in the exam to piece everything together. It's like a little puzzle. It's like playing Cluedo or something in the exam. And so I think the helpful thing is that I know that keystone species is in functioning ecosystems, but I at least know that it's in biodiversity. It's in Unit 3, Topic 2. It's going to be about ecosystems, and it's going to be about ecosystem functions. So then I go, okay, it plays a unique and crucial role, and it's going to be related to how an ecosystem functions. So then it must be a plant or animal because it has to be an organism that has interspecies and intraspecies interactions and contributes to biodiversity. So there you go. That is how you would remember that definition if you're really bad at memorizing things like me, or you just have a lot to memorize. So yeah. Okay, let's continue. What is a keystone species? So it's an animal that plays a unique or crucial role in the way an ecosystem functions, but what is it? So keystone species may have the impacts a keystone species will have on a habitat includes maintaining local biodiversity within a community. So this can be achieved by controlling populations or providing critical resources. Other indications of a keystone species include the ability to eat a variety of organisms, so a wide variety as well. We're talking hundreds, and actually be able to digest them properly as well. They have an influence over other organisms that is out of proportion to its biomass or abundance, and there are negative effects if the species is removed from an ecosystem. So essentially, the reason a keystone species is so important is because it is the reason the ecosystem has continued to function, and it is essential to the ecosystem functioning and to preserving biodiversity. So if you remove, the best way to understand what a keystone species role is if you remove the keystone species from the ecosystem, you have no functioning ecosystem. So that's kind of the best way to really put it together. It just has this disproportionately large effect on its environment relative to its abundance. So yeah, the way to truly like look and understand how keystone species is just they're going to impact biodiversity, they're going to impact the functioning of the ecosystem, and it's because they're going to impact it. The best way to understand is by looking at examples, obviously. So we're going to move on to our last content piece of the lecture. Woo! Made it. Very proud of you guys. So the one of the subject matter points I didn't get into, so we did skip two. I'm so sorry. One of them was predict, and because I believe you guys are I have so much faith in you guys of understanding how energy is transferred and transformed through an ecosystem, that you are able to predict where that energy change is coming from. So that's from faith in you guys understanding that. The second one is the analysis, to analyze a keystone species in an Australian ecosystem. It's just easier to look at it as a question, but I'm going to touch on it a little bit, talking about the cassowary. So cassowary is one of Australia's biggest keystone species, and the role it plays in its ecosystem is critical in comparison for how many cassowaries actually exist. So cassowaries eat, I can't remember the exact number, but it was definitely like, there's a 36 in it. It was either 36 or 136. But cassowaries eat almost every single available plant in their habitat. And even though there's not lots of cassowaries, because they eat so many plants and because they are so large and able to run so far between their large habitat, they're able to spread and germinate trees and plants throughout their habitat, which is in the rainforest. And because they can do that, they're continuing to protect and prolong the function of the ecosystem's vegetation, which then allows other animals to occupy, to have niches, to have food, to have like. So without the cassowary eating all of these plants and germinating all of these seeds and running around everywhere to spread this biodiversity and facilitating the spread of biodiversity, the ecosystem would not function, which is why the role the cassowary has in its ecosystem is so disproportionate to its like abundance, or the amount of cassowaries there are within that ecosystem. So that's the best way to, I guess, look at an Australian ecosystem and predict which one it is. This is the main one, but essentially what you were looking for in this, like, analyze and predict which is the keystone, like identify the specific keystone species from an Australian ecosystem, look at which animal has the greatest impact, and understand, like, in terms of the cassowary, and then apply it to the question that you're answering, how that impact is important to preserving the functioning of an ecosystem. So we have reached the end of the content. We have 20 minutes left, and I want to get through some of these questions to give you a little bit of further understanding of the content we've covered, a little bit of a change of pace instead of me just lecturing you, a little bit of me telling you, it's still me lecturing you, sorry. You can't get out of it. This is my time. This is my time to talk. I have the mic. Sorry, I really need to stop doing doing that. It's getting bad. But I'm gonna step you through how I would attack each question. We're gonna see how good my memory is after a year of not doing this sort of biology. And I'm also going to show you how I would break down questions, look at the cognitive verbs, and then do a little summary of everything we've learnt today. And then we will say our final farewells, and I will wish you the best on your journey. So, this is what we were just talking about. Define the term a keystone species. So, I really shouldn't have put this right after. I was in charge anyway. So define the term a keystone species. So we think keystone species plays a unique and crucial role. Okay, what part of the syllabus do they come from? Functioning ecosystems. Okay, so they play a unique and crucial role in functioning ecosystems. Oh, I really should have not done the answers this way. Okay. Don't look when I show you the answers. Don't cheat. If you were playing along at home as well, which you should play along at home. Don't just let me lecture you. When you are not watching this live, when you are watching the recording, play along at home. Listen to my soothing voice. So, define the term a keystone species. Essentially, unique and crucial role. And we know that it's within, it plays a unique and crucial role on how an ecosystem functions. So then it has to be an organism. So I think in my exam I put an organism, but you should put a plant or animal that plays a unique and crucial role in the way an ecosystem functions. And let's check our answers. A plant or animal that plays a unique and crucial role in the way an ecosystem functions. Yay! Good job, guys. Good job, me. Always be really kind to yourself. That's my goal for 2024. Determine the keystone species in Fig 1. So this is what I was trying to talk to you about. So what we're looking for is where the arrows are pointing and which animal appears to have the most arrows pointing towards it. So, I was going to say the northern quoll, that is actually good. I needed to check. So, as you can see, the northern quoll is in the center, but it also has the most arrows going in from all of these primary producers that these animals are all dependent on. So they're all dependent on the northern quoll, but then some of the animals, so they're all dependent on the northern quoll, and then the other animals they're dependent on what the northern quoll eats. So yeah, northern quoll. Okay, yay. And then which of the So if the keystone species population, sometimes you have to look at the answers when you're going through content. This is a studying technique and it is not a practice exam technique. Practice exams don't look at the answers. Studying, you can if it helps you to figure out your process of answering these questions. If the keystone species population was eradicated by disease, explain the effect this would have on the plants. So if the keystone species was eradicated, what would happen? So, what animals does the northern quoll eat? So, if you got the wrong keystone as well, keystone species, you most likely may not get marks. It depends on how they break up the EAMG actually. But just justify and just go with whatever you have down and really go for it, and give it a good 2 sentences, 2 marks, 2 sentences, and yeah, you're aiming to get one of the analysis marks. They'll probably do for getting the right one, justifying the right one, but then try and get the analysis ones even, get those follow through marks. But sometimes on a 2 mark question you may not, so it does really help to get this one correct, so you don't even have to worry about flow through errors. Okay, so the northern quoll, it eats reptiles, frogs, birds, yes, rodents, plants, and invertebrates. So if it was to die, all of these would become overpopulated because a lot of them, the main competitor that is consuming them is basically what would happen is they become immediately overpopulated and then would become close to extinct because all of these animals would be over using these animals to consume enough food. Let's check if we're right. So then the herbivores would flourish and the plant population would decrease. Yeah, so they would flourish, and then there would be a decrease in the population. Sometimes these questions are so confusing, honestly. I know I'm not in it, and I am teaching you and it's from a very different perspective, but it's such a mindset to be able to answer these questions, because there's not really any clue in the original question the QCEE gives you to, I guess, tell you exactly, explain the effects this would have on the plant. That is my bad. I'm not discussing plants. So that's something you need to look for, learn from my mistakes. Which is, something I did do when I was studying. I would make mistakes. I don't know everything. I do know everything that I've taught you so far is correct, but that's also because I double checked it. Me going through the questions is me trying to apply it, and sometimes you fail the first time. That's okay, because you pick yourself up and you keep going. But yeah, eradicated by disease, it doesn't necessarily say that you have to, name all of the animals that it consumes. It just says you have to explain the effects this would have on the plant. So it is definitely a mindset, and the more practice questions you do, the better you get at it. So let's move on to the next question, and hopefully I can redeem myself with some multiple choice. In ocean food webs, where phytoplankton is the first trophic level, the second trophic level of zooplankton often has a higher biomass than the phytoplankton at any given time. Which explanation would account for this? A, the zooplankton are also able to photosynthesize. B, different phytoplankton species are preying on each other. C, carnivores in the third trophic level have increased their consumption of zooplankton. D, the phytoplankton multiply faster than the zooplankton, but their lifespan is shorter. So, the answer to question 3, let's go through it. So, it wouldn't be zooplankton are also able to photosynthesize, because that doesn't really explain, well, one, they're like the second trophic level, so they're not the primary producer, and they're not at the first trophic level, so they most likely wouldn't be able to photosynthesize. Two, zooplankton and phytoplankton. We know phytoplankton are able to photosynthesize because of the phyto versus zooplankton. So it's just something we know about these kinds of organisms. But, so we know it's not going to be photosynthesized, and also it makes the least sense so far. Same with B. Different phytoplankton species are preying on each other. Well, that doesn't really make much sense as to why zooplankton has a higher biomass than the phytoplankton at any time. Like, it could be because they are preying on each other, but then would the zooplankton not be able to prey on them as well? So then you go C, carnivores in the third trophic level have increased their consumption of zooplankton. So you go, oh, it could be this, but why would that increase the biomass of the zooplankton over the phytoplankton? And it has to be at any given time. So you would assume that it's not just because of a recent increase. And then phytoplankton multiply much faster than zooplankton, but their lifespan is shorter. You go, well, yeah, that would probably make sense because there's more of them, and so they're making up for being a producer via abundance, but not necessarily because of the amount of biomass that they have. And so because they are they have a shorter lifespan, and because the zooplankton is preying on the phytoplankton, it would make sense that there are less phytoplankton available at a given time, or have a lower biomass than zooplankton. And the correct answer to this question is D. So pretty good. Question 8. The place where an organism lives is called its A, niche, B, habitat, C, community, D, environment. So we know that an ecological niche is discussing more the role in space it occupies and not necessarily its home or where it lives. We know that it's not a community. We know that it's not an environment because environment is the broader term. So we do go, it's niche or habitat, but we know that it's habitat because of the definition of habitat that we don't cover in this topic, but I'm pretty sure you do cover in topic 1, which is that an organism occupies its habitat. So yeah, and the answer to question 8 is B. So I have sufficiently redeemed myself. Was gonna do this one, but then I don't have a calculator, so it's a little tricky to, I guess, show you how to calculate it all out. But I will talk you through it quickly. So the table shows the daily energy input and output for a typical leaf. So input means it's going in, output means it's being released. Calculate the daily net energy stored by the leaf. So we go daily net energy. So incident sunlight is 43. So this is the input. And we're going to go, oh, evaporation. Well, that's a loss of energy. Oh, heat loss. That's a loss of energy. Reflection. Oh, well, that's a loss of energy. And then transmission. Well, that's a loss of energy. And then we're going to put it in our handy dandy calculator. Look at, it's not my methods one because I can't find the charger for that. So it's at college, but I can't find it at home, so I can't use it here. But let's subtract all of these. Are we subtracting? No, sorry. Subtract from 31.2. So 42.3 subtract 31.2. We get 11.1. We minus 2.1, which is 9. We minus 6.1, and then we minus 2.1, which is transmission, and we get 0.8 kJ, or kilojoules. We go, oh, we hope that's right. And then we go, it is, because the answer is to this question is A. Next slide. We don't have too much time left, unfortunately. Describe 2 ways carbon is transformed. We've got 5 minutes left. I'm trying to think which one. I think this is probably... So this last one is competitive exclusion principle, which we were just doing, but I am just going to take us into the summary. I'm so sorry. If you want to go through those questions, they are from the QCEE external papers. You can also pause them before, when you watch it, or you can go through the slides when you download them. I will write out my explanation of how I would tackle them during the live chat, but unfortunately we don't have time today because we took a long time during the nitrogen cycle. So let's go through the summary. I guess the question we can leave having answered is how, or trying to answer, is how do functioning ecosystems arise from organism interactions? And so we know that it's through the types of organisms, it's through this constant cycle of energy, through energy being transferred and transformed between different organisms who have feeding relationships, who have, we didn't get into it in this, but they do have symbiotic relationships. We have these, organisms that occupy the same niche. We have keystone species that literally are the determining factor of whether or not their ecosystem will function. So I think the way to answer this question is to not go, oh, well, it's this or it's that. It's, well, how do each of these things, how does energy transfer and transformation, how do energy cycles and how do ecosystem dynamics impact organisms, and how do the relationships that organisms have within each of these categories impact the functionability of the ecosystem? So that is definitely the key way to answer that question, and I hope that you have learnt from the content and are able to answer that question as well. I would say that functioning ecosystems arise from organism interactions because they are interrelated, and so an ecosystem is dependent on how an organism is occupying that space, and that organism can only occupy that space based on its interactions to that space and other organisms. Some final quick study tips before we go. Make sure that you are participating as much as you possibly can in class. Don't be afraid to get things wrong. Yes, it was a little embarrassing that I got the last question wrong, but also I'm pretty sure I got that wrong every single time I did my practice tests until I memorized the answer. Don't be afraid. Some of the biology questions are really, really hard, and sometimes you just need to look at the answer and see the process and memorize that and know that that is how you would answer that kind of question. The big takeaway, definitely really look at the syllabus. It's so important, and it's going to 100% help you answer every single question, and it is the fundamental, it's the keystone aspect to doing well in biology, is you and your understanding of the syllabus. But yeah, you guys are going to be so great. Don't stress. This is just a brief introduction. I know it's a lot of content. don't get overwhelmed or stressed. You're going to relearn it all in due time. And this is just going to be a really helpful revision tool, and it's just going to aid you along this journey. Good luck. You guys are going to do amazing. It's a tough year, but you really will get through it. And just reach out and use ATOL notes.